Gold just hit new all-time highs. Jerome Powell just delivered his latest remarks on the state of the economy. And with traditional markets closed tomorrow for Good Friday, investors are left wondering, are we gearing up for a break higher, or is this just the calm before the storm, with the classic sell in May and walk away setup just around the corner? We're breaking down how the markets are reacting, what the latest economic data means, and where things might be headed next, from crypto to stocks and everything in between. So be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of these daily uploads here at DataDash. My name is Paul, joined by Casi. This is DataDash, and you need to grab yourself a cup of coffee, whether it's hot or iced, because we're breaking it all down right now. Casi, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Paul. How are you?
Doing really well. It's been about a month since our last collaboration video. We were looking at things such as the SPY, the S&P 500, NASDAQ, Bitcoin, I believe a couple of altcoins. And we've pretty much been in the same environment ever since. We got nothing but head spins from tariffs. We've got some new rate cut decisions, I believe, that just got launched yesterday. And it's just kind of got everybody up in arms. So I'm really excited to kind of sit down with you, take a peek at what you're looking and how your outlooks are on the market into the next coming weeks. We have a little bit of a holiday weekend just as we're wrapping up this week. So in the shortcoming, maybe we'll take a look at what people can expect over the next coming days when the traditional market is closed for crypto. And then maybe if we get to it, we can look at and see how, I'm curious to know your thoughts on maybe like, are we heading into a sell in May, walk away type of situation in the next coming weeks? Or are we maybe gearing up for a little bit more of a breakout? Obviously, neither of us can tell the future, but it's just gonna be interesting to see what your outlook is as well as mine, I think, in this video.
Definitely curious to see what you think is going on as well, Paul. I know that you and I really are a lot aligned with our TA a lot of times. So let's see what we have right now. We did have that lower dip on Bitcoin. So I don't know if it's changed your outlook too much, but let's see what our charts look like here. All right, you guys. So I have the Bitcoin 4-hour chart pulled up here for you. And since our last video, Paul, we were kind of expecting this B wave, both of us were, coming up to around 93,000. And even with this last little low here on Bitcoin, down towards that 74,000 area, it didn't really change that projection a whole lot. In my opinion, I do still think Bitcoin needs to come up and complete a B wave. So for Elliott wave theory, the B wave corrects the first main wave down. So you can see from all-time high, we have really just had one main wave down here. This would be considered our wave A here. And then from there, we still need to see our wave B. And this is kind of where both you and I were aligned. We were expecting around that 92,000 to 93,000 area. And that last low there didn't really change that projection a whole lot on my chart here. So I do think from those last lows at 74,000 overall, we should be coming up for our B wave up to 92,500 or 92,000 even. So this would be the 0.5 retracement on Bitcoin, which is the standard Elliott wave.
That was my question. I was going to ask, what is a typical B wave correct to? Like, is it, typically to the 0.5 Fibonacci level, or is it a little bit of a leeway between 0.5 to the gold pocket, 618, 6.5 area? Or is it generally just the 0.5 is like the main level to look to?
Yep. So for B, the standard target is 0.5. The only rule, though, is that it can't make a new high. So we will target the 0.5, especially with the subwaves of B also hitting that 0.5 area. We're getting a lot of confluence there. But the only thing is that this B wave here just cannot come up to a new high to still be considered our B wave. And then from a B wave, we would have a C wave that breaks down to new lows after that. So whatever high this B wave does make does pull up the projections for that C wave. So it does impact it that way. But overall, we should be targeting that 0.5 retracement. So that's around 92,000 to 92,500 is right around there. So if I get zoomed in a little bit, though, so in the next few days, what we could be expecting is just a small subwave of that B. So the B wave should break down into its own ABC. with that B wave also targeting 0.5 and just can't make a new low. So that's the setup I have here. I have our ABC of the big B coming up to 92,000.
Okay.
So short term kind of coming down here, you can see we have support then from 80,500 to 79,000 again for just another test there.
Perfect. And what would you consider? So obviously this ABC correction would end up leading if we were to reject around that 93 or 95 even. This is obviously a pretty bearish outlook if it was to roll over into that case. But what would what would invalidate that, so to speak, I guess, or maybe lead to a little bit more of a bullish scenario if we were to just push up to that region? What kind of I guess what would kind of invalidate that ABC at this point, or does it even invalidate until you get to new highs?
Yeah. So like I was saying, technical invalidation would be at a new high. So this B can come up all the way to new highs. But what I'm going to be looking for are signs of exhaustion on the RSI. So as it's coming up to our targets here, looking at the 4-hour and the daily time frame to see if it is creating exhaustion at that target or if it's showing signs of strength, because we really shouldn't be showing any exhaustion here if it is going to head for new highs. This is going to be a really critical area in the market to look for that exhaustion or momentum. So I completely agree with you that there could be maybe a bullish scenario where this does break and ultimately maybe even lead to new highs on Bitcoin. I think this is going to be a really critical level to look for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, let me pull up my chart because it's really like, as you said, it's interesting how they do align here, and I'm looking at just a totally different perspective. But that 93 is definitely the spot. So I've got just a few levels here that I've pulled up here. And then for anybody that's new to me, I'm a range trader based on volume for the most part. I utilize high time frame averages, volume levels, horizontal levels, pretty harmonics as well, which is a sequence of Fibonacci's that you'll see a lot of the time. But overall, I'm looking at just really a simple range at this point, and also utilizing a high time frame average. So when I say that, I always refer to these. They're called pivots. I think I always like to say like it's similar to a moving average, but it just doesn't move. So when anyone's looking at a really big moving average like the 200-day or the 50-day, generally above is bullish, below is bearish. And in this case, we had a yearly pivot, which is the average of last year. So this is a 365-day average that does not move. Originally, when we started off this year, it was untapped. So that was a very key level. Anytime that these are untapped, it's very likely we come down to it in the next session. So i.e. This year, which we got to it pretty quickly, pretty much in January. And as long as we're holding above that, for me, I'm looking up, right? And that's just still remains the big key region that if we start to lose that, I agree with you. I think sizable downside probably towards like, 50, 60K over time is something that we'd have to really anticipate, obviously breaking it down as we go. But as long as we're holding above this and we've, kind of flirted with it so much here, pretty much just taking low after low after low, right? Anybody coming in taking new positions here is just getting really fearful or getting stopped out, usually met at extremes with the negative news. And then what happens every time is we just get a reversal here. So similar to how this was our yearly average, likely we met this year, we have a new quarterly average, which is sitting about $89,000. And that is last quarter's average, likely to be met this quarter. Obviously, the quarter is a long time. It's not too far from where we've already been, and it is just right above all these highs. So short term, next coming days, weeks, I anticipate the same thing, that even if we pull down back towards that $80,000 region, that 89.90 is the next major level for me. And then 93 really holds a lot of weight here because it's a untapped horizontal level, which if you zoomed out to the 3-month chart, we would see that this is a pretty big area where the traders tended to settle up. It's an area where we'll tend to come back and back test, going to be a major resistance when we come through it.
Yeah.
And it aligns well with what you were saying with 93K, which is right at that 0.5. So it's interesting. And another thing about the 0.5 Fibonacci, and all I'm doing is pulling a Fibonacci retracement now from the high to our current low. When you throw on the 382 and the 0.5, those are kind of the three top ones that I usually use at least. Everybody kind of overlooks the 0.5 a lot, and it's usually the gold pocket is where everybody targets. So this would be a really big area to get a front run of a really higher area up here, and then you just kind of roll over, take the highs and stuff. So yeah, when we come up to that region, it's definitely going to be a big one to be paying attention for. I think that there's multiple reasons that could, really indicate that that could just be a lower high after this whole situation. We got a nice breakdown. We put in our new low at the moment. That could very well be our lower high before we roll. And then, but so that's the bearish case, pretty much both in agreement with that.
Yes.
For me, as far as upside, however, now I'm just looking at this as a simple volume range. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling a fixed range volume profile from last quarter, all right, to the end of Q1. We're basically, if you're looking at this like the RSI, right, we're oversold, deviating outside of this range right now. So if we were to get into this region, which means flip that high time frame average, which is already going to be a good sign of strength, we'd be getting inside of a range. At that point, our natural target is the point of control, which is the highest area right here of volume. This is where the most transactions took place and where price action will seek out to return to, especially when we're within that range. And that means whether we enter from the top or the bottom. So that does sit around that gold pocket area. And for me, that $93,000 is so key, because if we do actually flip that region and get up to this area, aside from just closing right back below it, I will take that as more of a sign of strength that we probably would push up to the high side of this range. It pushes us all the way back up to $106,000. And at that point, I would think that we were, aside from yes, coming up and actually taking the high. That would be probably the signal that we'd probably see, barring another range, higher low down to the bottom of the range here again, that we would probably get some more upside and probably take this for a breakout to the upside for some new high over summer, or whatever the case may be. And this could very well be a few more months before we even get into this region, playing with everybody's emotions. So 93 is a very big one for me to flip. Yeah. Because once again, I'm not trying to just get only bullish once we hit $106,000. Like, obviously, to be put on down at the low. Yeah, you can take this up for short-term stuff, pay attention, gauge the context of the market, and then we kind of look from there. So
look for a breakout trade. What are your upside targets then? If Bitcoin does come for a new high, do you have those?
Yeah, so on a simple, obviously there's some short-term or some interims in the middle, but I'm just looking for at least locally, and I say locally, I guess on a bigger scale, I'm just taking a fib based extension from the low of August of last year to the all-time high to the new low. And I'm looking for the gold pocket, which I think is a simple one, just pretty much come and take the highs. But the 1-to-1 above that is sitting at about 134. If things got really hairy, 171 is way up there. But yeah, somewhere in this realm right here, I think is really, where we could, get in there. I know 120, 125. Once again, this is just a super simple outlook at the current price action. Now that we have a new low, which I think 120-ish is something around your next target zone too. Am I correct?
126 was my extension target. So that's right around what you're saying. Yeah. I definitely see that one extension too. I have that. If things get really extended, 135. Yeah. So that's right along with what I was thinking as well. Yeah, so really that 93,000 is going to be the differentiator between our really bearish outlook coming back down for 57,000 to 60,000 area, or coming up for new highs. So in the next few days, I do think we could have a little bit of a correction. It's going to be really important that Bitcoin does not make new lows below that 74,000 to keep, these plans valid. So I think in the short term, we're going to be coming down, testing those local supports, but then coming up to test that major 93,000 area, which is really what everyone should be watching.
Before we move on, I wanted to bring up something real quick. So we were talking in the beginning about potential for a sell in May and walk away type of situation where honestly, I could see us pushing up to 93K. I mean, it's the middle of April right now. So we could very well get something like that in the next 2 weeks. We could hang around. That's the other thing too, is we could hang around that level for days, maybe even 2 weeks and then if we don't get through it, still roll over. What are your thoughts on that? I guess it's something that obviously we don't know. We have to kind of come into it. But B, as far as sentiment would go, it's really interesting to see. Obviously, we are at some levels where Bitcoin's up, right? And the altcoins are not, but it's one of those deals where the altcoins haven't ran yet, but if Bitcoin does drop, it's going to annihilate everything, right? That's just kind of how this market ebbs and flows. But if we think back, I really haven't seen the market so one way or the other, where it's like everyone is, in a bear market situation, which I think is interesting because in my whole experience in this market, I still have yet to find what a definitive answer is on what how do you identify a crypto bear market? Like, what is it, right? Like in the stock market, we have the 20% downfall, like technically puts you in that category. Aside from everybody just hoping that they call the top, like there's no like, there is no like true blue, you lose the 50-day or the 21-day or whatever the case is. Like there's no way to tell that, right? So I don't really put too much stress into it in the sense of like being
labeling
worried about
it,
right after 30, like at this point it's just bullish trends and bearish trends
waves right at this point.
Right. But that's a really big piece that everybody really defaults to. And I think back to the summer of 2021, which was our last of note, bull market, so to speak. And sure enough, like right when we got that sell in May and walk away, we definitely got one then. It was a 50% pullback over, I think it was like 2 months, basically. I think we topped in April, and then like middle of May, it finally broke down. And at that low-ish, similar to what we have here, we have this 30% pullback so far. And just every day goes by, everybody's like, oh, I sold the high, the bear market's here, you're an idiot, or it's vice versa, or it's straight up like you're an idiot for not buying, or you're an idiot for selling the low. It's a 50-50 split in my eyes, at least from what I view it on the sentiment side.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on like what the outlook on the bear market type of idea is, or is it just, are you more aligned with what I would just said, where it's just like you just got to take it in strides as a trend?
Yeah. No, to your first point with sell in May and walk away, I really do think that our charts are aligning for that. And especially if we come up to 93,000, we start to see the RSI losing strength, possibly creating, an Elliott wave, 5-wave pattern up to there. Those are the signs that I'd be looking for. That could really align with a top in May. And even in the next few weeks. So I definitely think that we could see that. And it really is looking like it could be possible. And as far as sentiment goes, I judge a sentiment. I feel like a lot of my ex comments and interaction there. And I think there is a heavy bearish sentiment right now. I think, especially with alts, because they haven't really taken off. Like you're saying, they've been at that support, some of them for years, and haven't really seen that new trend. I think a lot of people would be in disbelief if it starts to really start that new trend now.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And obviously, once again, we don't know which way it's going to go, but I just find it incredible if this was a time where we did roll over for, a year goes by or something, where Bitcoin just goes down for that time period versus doesn't necessarily even need to make like crazy all-time highs. Obviously, we're just highlighting 10 and 20% higher than where we were just a couple months ago. The altcoins are the interesting one. And actually, I wanted to share my ETH versus BTC chart today. Like we'll take another look at that here in a second.
Yeah.
But let's move on to a couple of things in the traditional market. Would you like to cover AMD actually? And then I'll take a look at gold.
Okay. I'm step back here on the 4-hour AMD chart. And Nick and I, actually in their first collab here on DataDash, we were looking at this AMD and we were tracking this ABC coming down. So you can see we are right at the targets that we were targeting. It's right at that golden retracement level, as well as our C targets. So this is the C target, the 1.236, right at those golden retracement levels. So overall, we are there right at support. But we just got news, in the last few days of added tariffs for semiconductors, and you can see that reaction there. But what's impressive is how well these golden retracements are just still holding on, even with that bearish news, just right back to that golden pocket, right on the RSI MA support. It didn't break support with that major bearish news there. So overall, this is still a really nice area for accumulation on AMD. So I'm surprised that it didn't drop further. I do think that we could be holding these levels here. We do have that lower target at that 786 retracement. That's at 55.45. So if it does start to break these golden pockets here, we could still see down here. But I think with us coming to these golden retracements, hitting that C target, we really should start to turn around soon on AMD.
Interesting. And then, I would imagine if AMD turns around, we'd see NVIDIA and a couple of the others probably getting a decent push. Usually they run in tandem. Yeah, I remember that being your very first episode. That was very interesting to see it unfold. And what was that, 2 months ago? And it just really goes to show too, just the time that some of these take to unfold. I know that everybody wants the immediate turnaround, or if you're looking for that buy zone, you have to give it some time. Sometimes it doesn't come down to some of these key levels until, you know, months and weeks, and there's bounces along the way. And then just the amount of news and economic events that have occurred in the last, just, let me see, that was what, January time? Yeah, 90 days. It's been wild.
Yeah, it has been wild. Yep. You can definitely see a little bit of a foundation building here. So I'm excited to watch what happens from here in AMD.
All right, I got gold pulled up here because it's definitely making, you know, turning some heads here. Yeah. If we weren't in, if we didn't have the gold ticker on here, and if we were a few years back, you'd think this was Bitcoin, just with how parabolic this has been, or even like Nvidia from last year. And it's really been incredible. I mean, we've got all these, for me, I'm tracking obviously some key levels below that really aren't relevant until we start breaking any lower. And similar to Bitcoin, where we were looking at price discovery, essentially, you're looking at some of these fib extensions. Gold pocket sat here at 3,100, which we pretty much front ran back on the 3rd of this month, got a little pullback, and then ever since just been straight launch pad. So at this point, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't make its way, as long as we're obviously holding the structure, like up towards 3,600 in the near future here. The only thing about stuff like this is, like, obviously we can see some of these pretty drastic moves here. So is it a time to buy gold? You know, generally, I don't chase these after they're, you know, something that's moving like this. But anybody that's holding gold, you know, totally congrats. And, you know, that's definitely paying off in this fashion. And I would look for that move up to 3,600, which is a pretty sizable move from here. Another 10% move, which for gold is monstrous. I mean, even just since the last low, it's already up 12. So yeah, really impressive stuff here. Now, generally people, when we see gold, you know, pushing like this, everyone looks at it as like a run from risk, right? Like for everyone that's anticipating a market crash. And usually when we see gold pushing up like this, generally it's for when investors are running for a little bit of more risk off, anticipating a pullback in the market, and, you know, trying to protect their capital. What do you think about that? And like, so for me personally, I guess I'll go first with that, is that while similar to what we were just discussing with Bitcoin, where the sentiment is so negative, I'm not trading the stock market each and every day, so I don't necessarily get that feeling or you know, see that, I guess, as much. But what I do know in crypto market, at least, is when everybody, and not even everyone, I mean, even when a good 50-60% leans one way, you know, you either get the whipsaw for both parties to get kind of knocked around, or vice versa. But I would agree with you that it's a little bit more on the bearish side. Even when you look at fear and greed, on fear and greed index for crypto, at least, it leans to the point where everyone's really fearful, expecting lower, anticipating that 110,000 was the bull run high. And I just can't see a world where that plays out, you know, like where everybody's correct. And once again, the altcoins are dead. I've seen people just unloading Ethereum left and right, basically at the low. And the last time I saw something like that was Bitcoin. I knew people that were unloading their Bitcoin, and because of the fear at that point, it was at the FTX collapse right at the end of the year, 2022, willingly got rid of their crypto, afraid that it was gonna, you know, collapse and scam this and scam that.
Yeah.
And it just did nothing but absolutely melt faces, obviously, ever since. And could be wrong on that, obviously, with the altcoins and things like that. But I just feel like the probabilities at this point would be that we actually would see a move higher out of these things. And when we flip it now to stuff like this with gold and the stock market kind of being a little rocky. I mean, we've seen a pretty decent pullback in the stock market already. I mean, we could very easily still recover from that and continue higher. I have the outlook that the 20-year housing market cycle, economic cycle, business cycle is kind of what's leading this last charge here that technically would be kind of completing in 2026 to 2029, which is a wide window, but and we can see obviously pullbacks along the way. But I still think that the market has upside, like for a good period of time. If I'm being honest, obviously I'm not like married to that, and I'm not like, you know, everybody go out there and, you know, sell your house and buy some assets, because it's too late for that, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm just curious to know your thoughts, because another thing I see a lot is that Buffett, right, hasn't deployed any capital and has been unloading. And that's what a lot of investors will look to and say, oh, if Buffett's not buying, that's got to be a signal. One thing I always like to bring up is that Buffett is an investor, and he buys the dips and sells the rips, but his dips are not our dips. He buys recessions. He bought in 2008 and he's selling here in 2012, sells it 2016, sells it 2020. Exactly. And you know, he doesn't buy back on those because he bought the bottom
Exactly.
And that's when those boys get in and out, right? That's the way they ride it. And a really great example of that is they sold out and didn't buy nothing, or not nothing, but they didn't buy much in COVID. And obviously COVID crash would have been the latest, big dip to get in on, and they never bought anything. And same thing, people were like, oh, they're not buying, I'm not buying.
Right.
Market skyrocketed. And so I'm just curious to know your thoughts on it with gold pushing up. Like, what's your outlook, I guess, on the overall markets on a little bit more macro scale?
Yeah. No, I from what I've noticed, I really feel like markets have been just heavy reactionary markets. So with the tariffs coming and everyone rushing into gold to try to find that safe avenue, seeing Bitcoin coming down, maybe they're just not ready to take that risk. But just like you said, as soon as Bitcoin starts to come up, maybe those people start to get interested. We have Bitcoin we have gold at the high, but possibly Bitcoin and alts ready to rally. So right now, with that huge scare in the tariffs, maybe that's driving that fear into gold. But we could see that shift soon if we start to come up on Bitcoin and people start to see that there is strength back in the markets. I really do think this B wave on Bitcoin could get a lot of attention. Even if we do resist around that 93,000, the B rally could bring in a lot of people thinking it's going to make a new high. So we could start to see a top on gold as people shift over to crypto. That could happen. But then I've also considered too, maybe we don't even need external capital to come in here. Maybe it's a rotation and capital shift in our market, even from Bitcoin to alts, or even condensing into fewer alts, our market cap, where we have like more of like a purge from legislation and kind of things like that. So I think that there's a lot coming with legislation, and people are just heavily reacting right now to this, and almost overreacting is from my perspective. Yeah.
The number one thing too is like there's definitely negative news catalysts and economic events that are going on, but the number one thing that will move everyone's sentiment or whatever the case, it's the price action. And we've seen time and time again too, where we can have bad news and the price action pushes. Sometimes we get both news, price action does nothing. That's why it's a little, it's good to be on the both sides of technical analysis and fundamentals, so you can kind of pair them to some degree. But yeah, it's a really good point you brought up about legislation too, especially for the crypto market. It's one thing I do want to like really put out there too, is that I've been investing in this market for almost 10 years. And so I've been through the big one of 2017. I know you have as well. And then even a couple more years before that. But 2017 was definitely the wild, wild west. 2021 was like a little less rowdy, but still kind of wild. This time around, the only thing wild was the Solana memes, that kind of factor. I guess the AI agents kind of got wild for a minute. But aside from that, like you said, it's just been the Bitcoin show. Altcoins have been pretty much stagnant on the side. And I really didn't think about the idea of where we could see like people just cash even just institution level, right? Where you see the ETFs and everything. These profit levels have been so big on Bitcoin, and they could very well just pull that out, drop that into some altcoins, obviously for a short term, whatever it is, or however that transition may be, similar to gold and going into some of the stocks. But yeah, that's a very interesting point to bring up. And I did want to get your thoughts on Ethereum. So we're talking about altcoins, and then I'll bring up the ETH versus BTC chart, because even though it's getting close to the lows, it's still got a decent little setup here. It's just not really showing its hand quite yet. But I am curious to know what you think about Ethereum, and the reason being for anybody out there is that I know that at the moment it seems like it's completely dead. Bitcoin was that asset just 2 years ago in 2022. I promise you, I guess 3 years, 2.5. So it's just interesting. I get really excited and involved with some of these things when they are at these extreme levels. And Ethereum, unlike many others, is one that I actually really enjoy, because unlike the millions of cryptos that are out there, the altcoins, which I do think will all go to zero, I think that there is a 90% chance that anything that does not have the letters ETF stamped at the end will not be here in years to come, right? And that's just the risk I think that I'd put out there. I wouldn't be holding anything in my mind with like a 10-year outlook of something that's just a brand new project that's doing well now, that doesn't have that institutional backing. just because we might see a .com bubble pop at some point, and that's very much where the risk is, right? Yep. Just on a term of risk, I could totally be wrong about that, but that's just where my mind goes at this point. Like I'm not jumping into things like I would in 2017 right now, as we're approaching like the end of, in my opinion, that really big macro cycle. Right. I do think that, like it's a big curves coming in the legislation, and I think will play a huge role, and it's going to be interesting. But anyways, that was a ramble, but I'm curious to see what you think about Ethereum at the moment, the queen of the alts, if you will.
Yeah, so I've been almost scared looking at this Ethereum chart for a while. It has just had a continuous drop since that 4,100 area, that double top there. And we are coming down past a 786 retracement. So this technically did break market cycle. And just like you're saying, it's really actually causing a lot of fear, I think, in the market as far as Ethereum goes. I just read a comment that someone actually dumped all of their Ethereum for XRP. So those kind of comments kind of give you the sentiment of where this is at. But like you said, as far as like for analysts and technical analysis, this is really, really can get excited at these lows down here, because we are retracing pretty heavily and coming down close to support. So it's hard to see on the screen there, but we have support at 1534, so very close here. And then that last low that hasn't been touched yet is 1300 on my chart. I don't know if you have those supports there, but I do think it's possible if we come down for another little low that we find support at 1300. That's going to be a critical area there.
Definitely. I'll share mine real quick.
Okay.
Just the stairs down. I'm really hoping we take the elevator up here soon. Oh man. Yeah. So one crazy thing that I really want to point out in this, and once again, when we're talking about just the high levels of risk that this market has, unfortunately, Casi, myself, no analyst out there, no trader out there, nobody has a crystal ball and we can tell exactly what's going to happen. Sometimes we lean a certain way and you nail it and whatever, but there's no 100% way to know, right? We're just we're hedging our bets as much as everybody else is, right? I bring that up because 2023, right? Had you entered into Ethereum in November of 2023, so almost 2 years ago, you had gains 3 times over, up to $4,000. You can't really see that. 4,000 obviously in March of last year, down and back up to $4,000, and then in a 2-month span, completely unravel, right? It is the #1 example of why you don't have to, anybody's free to do their own thing, but the taking profits idea here, or doing how Buffett does, right? Laddering out on the way up, because whether or not this continues to 10x from here, whatever, it doesn't matter, because it's one of those things where it's like, I look at it like this. I don't care how much more it could go. I just care how much I can make. And that's the biggest key. And then also, if you are, anytime you're up 100, 200%, and maybe over the next couple of years, that number kind of drops to, we see 40 and 50% rises is kind of the only thing we'll start to see. But you pull some kind of amount off, so you have something to basically re-enter at lows or whatever the case is, or you don't want to jump into the ocean from that high. Very similar situation. Straight up stairs down. We swept the 2023 Q3 lows. So once again, back all the way, I'm sorry, not even in November, but even all the way to October, right before we got that nice rally. And so far, we've been chilling around this region. And for me, I can't remember. I'm sorry if I missed what you said was a level you want to see flipped. If you did mention that,
1300
for upside.
For upside. So I believe that low that you have where it's touching, I'm at 1534 for support. I didn't mention, I don't have my retracement levels pulled, but I can get that just quickly. So I'd be looking at 2750. So that would be the 0.5 retracement at 2750. That's kind of like where I gauge if it's heading into more bullish or bearish. So 2750 is where I think that we could start to get excited. 2750 is kind of right in this action here. You can kind of see how that would be a nice break of all of this behavior happening here. So exactly. 2750 kind of breaking up. I have 4500 as an extension target. So not making crazy new highs. From these prices, it's great, but not necessarily making crazy new highs on Ethereum. So.
Right. So yeah, similar. Obviously, taking it as a little bit more locally area here. Like
Yeah.
I'm looking at more of a get up above 1670, and then probably from there we run it up to that same. That 2700 is the big level for me too.
Yeah.
There's a couple of really high volume levels. I mean, all kinds of like the most key targets that I look to above us. Granted, nothing's really going to materialize until we get back above 1670. So aside from that, obviously we have more things down below. I do want to point out we have a potential harmonic pattern, right? So this is once again a sequence of Fibonacci that did complete down in this region pretty nicely. I would really look to see more of a confirmation once again at this point to flip that 1670 and probably close like daily, at least daily closing candles above that region. And then the targets of this, I brought it up a couple times on some of the videos, but it's the 382 retracement, which is just a fib retrace from the overall high to low. And then if we blow through that, well, we've got the 2700. I'm in agreement with you that that's probably the green light for more upside. The only other major level above that would be the gold pocket, this B point, and then it's also a volume target. So those are the three major areas for ETH. And with a move so drastic like this, not to put out any sort of hopium or anything like that, but just as much as when we're trading like this going up into the upside, like I bring up that stairs up and elevator down comment because we tend to see that quite often. And when you're in such extreme levels, which we are here at ETH, and even if we just push up to some of these targets here and then still roll over, I think that's something that everybody should be kind of prepared for here, is that especially when you get this just drastic move right here, nothing for you get one. I know the news stuff is a little tough to obviously know when it's coming unless you see something obviously across the board, like an FOMC meeting or something like that. But when you get into these levels here, for me, I'm looking for setups like that harmonic where we have the targets up here. So I'm getting position in these regions, but and then when we get them, it's quick, right? You can't trade off of the news usually. Half the time it comes out, you'll get a big burst. Everybody starts rushing in or asking what happened. And a lot of times it's like, oh, well, actually, if you look back, we had this perfect setup. It just took 2 weeks to unfold. But yeah, some really big levels there. And I did want to share to kind of finish us off the ETH versus BTC pair. Because similar to you and Nick on the first episode, I think this was one of the first things I really ever shared. And this is a major setup. Bullish reversal pattern on a macro scale. This is the weekly setup rate or weekly chart. So each candle is a week. And this overall setup, this pattern at play is taken from 2019 August till obviously right now we're still making lows. So this is one of those things, right? I can't marry this by any means. It's not really showing any strength at the moment. This could very well still fail, come down lower and have to reevaluate it a little bit. But if we were to start seeing some upside out of here, a little bit of a reversal, which once again, we're at extremes on Ethereum's price. We're at levels where everybody's expecting downside. Everybody's expecting the alt season to not occur at all. I almost kind of hate the term alt season because it's just that's not what it's not what it used to be, right? Yeah, it's just a rally, right? The market rallies and yeah, exactly. A sector more than anything. ETH versus BTC is kind of how I gauge the overall altcoins to be moving, right? Even though, and this is just really gauging Ethereum. I know that there's other charts like the others charts or the just total 3 and stuff like that, where it just actually packages up all the altcoins. But usually when we see Ethereum outperform Bitcoin, it's a time where the altcoins overall do as well. I will, however, say, if we start to break this pattern and this downtrend essentially to the upside, there's 3 major targets of this once again, which are pretty sizable for to see any kind of price action move up. I wouldn't imagine it happens overnight, and this actually leads me into the idea of where you could see an uptrend kind of developing over the next like 15 months, maybe, once again into the idea where that housing market cycle, that economic cycle and everything kind of still continues up for a few, maybe a year or two more than everybody thinks here. That's kind of how I'd see this kind of unfolding. And we're at the lows, I guess, is just what I want to point out the most. Only thing about that is if we come over here to where we bottomed last time, if you were to say, oh, I accumulated Ethereum or I held or whatever the case was in this region here, we had some highs, some lows, some ups, some downs. Overall, if when we got up to these regions, you probably didn't care, what happened back here. But if we lived out this time down here, this was 2019. We technically bottomed out against Bitcoin. Then we made a higher low over here, but this was in December of 2019, right? And then we still progressed up and higher low even over here. So between this region, you were making higher lows against Bitcoin. However, the dollar amount still went down, right? Because if we think back, this was the COVID drop of 2020 March. Obviously, Ethereum, the whole market obviously took a hit and then recovered pretty well. So I just want to point out that even though this is a setup to where, for me, I'm accumulating Ethereum, I'm building, that position for a little bit of a lengthier ride here, the dollar amount still could go down. So even if it's the $1,300 region, like you had brought up, or maybe even a little lower in the coming months here, but over time, I do still think that we have a pretty sizable rally on ETH in the coming future, right? So it's just something I'll be monitoring across the way. Like I said, we are coming down to the lows, so it's just something that could start to get invalidated around here. I'll have to look for a little different setup, but we'll see how it goes. I'm interested to see if we do get a little excitement in Ethereum now that everybody's really just given up. It's usually what the case is. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for today's breakdown. As always, we're going to be keeping a close eye on the charts and the headlines as we head into the holiday weekend. If you got any value out of today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the little bell so you never miss a beat. Big thank you for tuning in from both Casi and myself. We appreciate all the support. Be sure to enjoy your long weekend, stay sharp out there, and we'll see you all in the next one. And until then, everybody, cheers.
Bye.